everyone, and welcome to another edition of Connecting with Kim here on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network. I'm so happy you joined me today and my guests, and I'm so excited about the show. You can also catch the audio for this show on Sun Radio 96.3 FM in Sun City Center and on stream Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3:30. So thanks for joining us again today. We have a great show for you. I want to thank my sponsor, the Spring of Tampa Bay, for my on-air wardrobe. They supplied the top for me today and this beautiful necklace. And I want you to all go and visit them at Henderson and Swann, where the Spring Boutique for the Spring of Tampa Bay is located. And if you are not familiar with the Spring of Tampa Bay, let me just take one moment to acquaint you with the wonderful work they do. They have been in business since 1977. They provide sanctuary and services to abused adults and their children, so survivors of domestic violence. They are the largest of 42 certified facilities in shelters in Florida, and they are the first to have an accredited school on site. So they do great work, and all the proceeds, net proceeds from their sales at the boutiques, the thrift store on North Willow and the boutique at Swann and Henderson, go to support their services, as well as any donation that you might care to make. So if you don't know anything about the Spring, go online, check them out. They are a beautiful, wonderful organization, and they deserve your support. All right. So my guest in the chair today, I'm so excited about this. It's his first time on Connecting with Kim, so that's a great thing. And his name is Tom Gaitens, and Tom is the Florida Executive Director of Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, or CALA. And they are concerned with tort reform, and we are going to better understand that in our interview with him today, as well as talking about property insurance in the state of Florida, which I know is on all your minds. And he is also the elected state committeeman for Hillsborough County for the Republican Party of Florida. So welcome, Tom, to Connecting with Kim.
Kim, it's great to be with you. This is exciting.
Thank you, and we're so excited to have you, and especially since it's your first time.
Absolutely.
So as everyone who watches the show knows, I always like my guests to take the top of the show and spend a few minutes sharing their life journey with our audience, because you just never know when somebody's out there listening and you might have something in common. So take as much time as you want and just look into that camera and
Kim, you know,
let it rip.
I've been an activist at heart my entire life. I mean, even in college, at USF, I was the Chief Justice of Student Government. We had some incredibly big cases for such a small entity, but it was exciting, but it made me interested in the law. I thought I was going to go into something very unique. So I wanted to be a Sovietologist coming out of college. I studied Russian history, the Soviet Union. I was an international studies major, got a couple degrees at the same time with some minors, economics and history and political science, but international studies had been my love. And so I thought I was going to be doing that. The Soviet Union was breaking up at the time, 1989. And I realized maybe there's another place for me. The CIA wasn't hiring in the area that I was looking at. They wanted me to study Arabic, and I was not ready to study Arabic. Long story short, that interest in law, I started working here downtown for a law firm, and it piqued my interest in the law. Unfortunately, I watched a lot of the attorneys at the time when I was doing research, who I was doing research for, get divorces, and it discouraged me a little bit. I saw so many attorneys out there working so hard, putting in amazing hours, but the sacrifice was on the family. And I knew from the start I was a strong family man. That's kind of where my roots are. That was where the foundation of my life was going to be set. And so fast forward, I decided law school was not for me, so I went into more activism type of activities. In the 90s, I worked for Empower America, Citizens for a Sound Economy, American Solutions, eventually going to FreedomWorks, becoming the state director of FreedomWorks for the state of Florida for about 11 years. It's just in my blood. I see problems, I want to solve them. I'm a public policy person. Many years ago, we saw a problem in the retirement. We're heading to that same situation.
We are again.
We're having problems. And I brought, at the time, Speaker Rubio and Congressman Jim Davis together to talk about the challenges we face, and it was a fun thing. We did it on PBS. It was a fun time. That's just the type of person I am, the things I like to do. I see problems, I want to solve them. So that's kind of where I am.
Well, I've known you for quite a while because we travel in the same political circles.
Yes.
And have been for a while. So so this is so exciting for me because I'm going to know you from a different perspective within the show. So, and it's so funny. I was just, as I was listening to you talk about your experience and your passions, and we're going to talk about tort reform. I am, oddly enough, at the time we are recording this interview, I am reading The King of Torts by John Grisham.
Sure.
And so this is just going to lead right, because I am getting an eye-opener. You always do when you read his books.
Absolutely.
You get a great story, but you get your eyes opened about a lot of different topics.
Yep.
And so let's just jump right into, unless you want to share more about let's jump into what is Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse all about.
So we focus, again, as you pointed out, tort reform. Tort reform has been a big issue for me, even back in Freedom Works and Citizens Sound for Economy days. The ultimate issue is tort reform, tort, is something that's absolutely necessary. We all need a mechanism for redress for grievances we have in our system against other people, against other businesses. It's an important way to bring a balance. You know, we use the scales of justice. Tort reform, tort itself, tort law, is that balance that keeps things. We can't always anticipate the problems we're going to see, whether it's product lines or societal, right? So the legal system fills in that gap by helping create that balance. But sometimes there's an imbalance. And where I come into play with Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, we're focusing on frivolous lawsuits. We're focused on the things that we hire a actuary every year to study every state and say, what are the costs of torts upon every one of us as citizens of each state, and then where are the excessive processes and how they affect people financially. Well, that becomes a analysis we do every year at the end of the year. And we understand that in the state of Florida, for instance, excessive lawsuits cost Floridians about $2,100 per family of four. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, especially in these inflationary times.
Precisely, and the reason I got involved was, we'll segue into this more so into the roofing and property insurance issue, but the reality becomes these costs, or hidden costs in our life, are significant, and we often don't know about them until we're alerted to them, or they show up on our doorstep, so to speak. We call that a tort tax because that's a real fact. Just like inflation is a hidden tax,
right,
a tort tax is a hidden tax. The frivolous lawsuits add cost to our goods and services, and in this case, and particularly in Florida, we just saw a special session on this very issue on property insurance.
Right.
It's that important, and it's costing people it's allowing them to, or not allowing them to move up to the next, from their starter home to their next home. There's various ways this impacts people's decision making, even on the product lines, when you decide to buy things, the cost of doing business in America. Doctors, one of the reasons we have high health insurance is the high liability insurance doctors have to pay. And so what's a doctor going to do in that situation to avoid being sued? He's going to, when you come in to see him, Kim, he's going to throw every test at you, and he's not going to use
whether you need it or not.
Whether you need it or not, because he's protecting himself against the lawsuit.
He is.
So he's raising the cost of your visit arbitrarily, not because he wants to, because he's afraid not to.
Right, he's afraid not to.
That's how behavior, what we call unintended consequences of frivolous lawsuits, affects us every day.
Well, let me ask a quick question. So you rank the states, and so where does Florida at $2,100 per family? Where does it fit in the ranking?
Thank God. So we've been fortunate. In 2018 and 2019, the Florida Legislature had made some good inroads in tort reform efforts. So we dropped from what we call the judicial hellholes. Florida had been a judicial hellhole since 2004. And we finally left the list. We're now at 11, 12, some are right around there right now. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this special session, we didn't have a good session. The general session was not good for our battle against tort reform, or for tort reform, but the special session may be very helpful. But there's a lot that had to be done. There was a lot that was done. Not all of it was perfect. Not all of it was great. I would have much rather seen us deal with the problems we faced during session when we had time to have committee hearings and look at the good and bad and anticipate the unintended consequences. When you go into a week-long special session, you reduce the ability of putting out excellent product, and that's what we all want.
Right.
So the jury's still out. A lot of what they did was excellent, and we can talk about that further, but some of it still remains to be seen. How is it going to impact the long-term costs of property insurance for Floridians? If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it probably at an 8. I think it's going to do a good job, but we lost a lot of ground on time and impact. And so what we're going to see is a delayed response by the insurance industry on rates, just because it was so late in the game.
Well, and I love how you explained what tort is, because I think there's probably people sitting out there in my listening and watching audience that are looking at the screen or listening and saying, what does tort mean? And you did a great job. But let's bring it to a real practical example. So, for instance, let's say I come out with a drug. And I'm a drug company and I come out with a drug. And this drug addresses a major need in the marketplace. And let's say, despite all my best testing and FDA approval process and whatnot, the drug has unintended consequences, which maybe don't materialize until, let's say, 2-3 years after the drug's been out in the general marketplace. And now some of these problems show up. And this is what leads to, and I know you've all seen it on television because you can't get away from it, is class action lawsuits.
Correct.
And class action lawsuits are part of the whole tort process, where we give average, everyday American citizens who maybe couldn't afford to sue for what happened to them, the drug company themselves, but if they combine with a lot of other people across the country, and there are lawyers that just specialize in nothing but tort cases and nothing but class action lawsuits.
That's right. And so that's a cottage industry, as you point out.
It is.
It really is a cottage industry. There's good and bad to that, unfortunately, because as a plaintiff, if you've been harmed, if you've been aggrieved by a company, and you have to use that means, your benefit from, at the end of the day, is not going to be significant.
Right, because they're going to take all this.
It's going to be spread among, first among the attorneys, and then if you've ever sent back one of those postcards, right?
Right.
And if you ever get something returned, it's like $15.
Right.
And it's like, that was the benefit that I received from this. So class action lawsuits, truly by nature, sometimes they do impact us on a product liability reality, right? It may, at some point, help us on a product liability reality. But more often than not, they really enrich the attorneys. And that's why there's some specialized, as you point out, cottage industry. But this is the whole reality we live in America today.
Well, there's so many lawyers.
There are so many.
They keep kicking them out of law school, every year, and there's more and more of them. And so, and we live in a society now where nobody wants to take responsibility for the personal actions. So if something goes wrong and you do something maybe you shouldn't have done, and we've all been there, you want somebody to be held responsible. So now you get a lawyer and you sue.
Or, and this is, I'll segue into the property insurance crisis we've had.
Because of that crisis.
It's been a horrible crisis because it's, not only is it expensive for people, the average on a $300,000 home in Florida, it's probably about $3,600 on property insurance costs. The second or third highest in the nation based on different, it's 1, 2, or 3. It depends on where you are in the state of Florida. But here's the problem. We've allowed, through the assignment of benefits, that's where you sign off over your rights as a consumer or property owner to a third party to deal with your roof, the litigation, and a whole 9 yards. Think about it this way, and this is the number I want people to remember, because this is the one that shows the imbalance in the system. 8% of the claims, property insurance claims in America, 8% are in America, or in Florida. That's 4 times higher than it should be, right? If there's 50 states, it should be 2% per state, right, to make it 100%. But we have 8%. That's 4 times. That makes sense because we have a lot of more risks with hurricanes and bad weather, horrible rains, right, flooding, because we're a low-level state. So it makes sense that we have a higher number of claims. But here's the problem. 76% of the property insurance lawsuits in the nation are in Florida.
Okay, so we have to, let's, if you're joining me just now, my guest on Connecting with Kim is Tom Gaitens, who is the Florida Executive Director for Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, CALA, and we're talking about specifically now property insurance, how we got to the point we're at now, and what we can do about it. So those are astounding numbers. 8% of all the states, but out of that 8%, 76%.
Of all lawsuits.
Of all lawsuits.
So
that's astounding.
That's scary. I mean, it's scary. It's showing that.
It's shocking.
And so what we find through that is that tort tax that we talked about earlier is really impacting you and I and everyone in your listening audience. Anyone who's a homeowner, you're paying higher property insurance rates because of the frivolous lawsuits and the ease by which they go. And one of the primary things, and they did try to address this during the special session, and that is that through the assignment of benefits, where I as a homeowner, and by the way, that's how I became the executive director for Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse. Someone knocked on my door, like he did, like they do all the time. A guy came, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I was looking at your roof and I saw it looks kind of old." I was not thinking about this. I had taken care of my parents' house down in Sarasota, put a new roof on it, but we paid out of pocket. I thought that's what I was going to do for my house because I knew the roof was old. It was 17 years old. I knew it was about time I needed to replace it. But there's a thing called roof envy in Florida. It basically started in the villages, and it's matriculated around the state, and that is, oh my gosh, my neighbor, my golf partner, the guy I go have beers with, the girl who cuts my hair, they all got their roofs replaced, and all they had, for free. So why can't I? The problem is we've conditioned people in the state of Florida to think that homeowners insurance is a warranty, not an insurance program. So they don't think of their houses, the roof as a depreciating asset, that on year 2 it's worth X, and year 10 it's worth Y, and year 17 it's worth Z, right? It's a depreciating asset, but that's not how the industry works. They want the insurance company to pay for the entire roof when there's damage on year 17, as opposed to what the roof is worth at that time, because it's not worth what it was on year 2 and 5
Well, of course
and 10.
not, or year 1.
Exactly. So, but that's how the system is abused. And so once you sign over your rights to that third party, because they'll come and say, "Oh, we'll take care of this for you." They wouldn't disclose all the realities for you, but what they would do is they'd sign you up, they'd bring you into the game, they would inspect your roof, and then they go to the insurance company and say, "Hey, this roof needs a new roof." But ultimately what would happen, the insurance company would say, "Listen, there was no cause for action for this. There was no wind incidences in that area." And so then, boom, the suit gets actuated. And the way this works out is the average cost of a non-litigated claim in Florida was $11,000. The cost of a litigated claim was $55,000. And who's paying that $55,000? The insurance company is, but we are the ones, because everyone who
They're
has a
not
policy,
going to absorb it.
And that's why they've
They're
lost
passing
money.
it on.
And this is where the problem is. You mentioned earlier off air that you had a friend who just lost her property insurance. I did right before I had this incident.
Well, this is happening
Yes.
I can tell you in my neck of the woods in Hillsborough County, people are being told straight out we are not renewing your insurance unless you replace that roof. Now, the cost of the roof replacement has gone through the roof. No pun intended.
Yes.
It's absolutely astronomical.
That's right.
And I don't understand personally. I mean, I came from the Chicago area, right, where there were tile roofs all over the place, and they lasted hundreds of years. And we can't make a roof last 20. And it's like, what is that all about? I think the whole thing is just, it boggles my mind.
That's a whole nother issue, but you're right. That's a whole nother issue. But on the terms of what we're playing for, and think about it, with the person who loses that insurance, they either have to go find a new carrier, which is going to probably increase. By the way, since 2018, property insurance rates in Florida have gone up about 35%, right? But that's if you've kept your current carrier and they've just given you increases. If you were canceled, you may have to pay 80, 100% more for the next policy. And then if you find somebody, because you may not find somebody, you may be pushed into citizens insurance, which is the state program to protect people from losing that coverage. But here's where the problem rests. And because the system is been abused, we're all paying each other's higher costs. We're spreading this cost out amongst all homeowners, and it's impacting everybody. And this is why it's important. For instance, I love the arts. One of the reasons I'm here is because I do love the arts. I've raised my family on the arts. We go to the Performing Arts Center. We've had season tickets to various centers. But this last couple of years, because of the high cost of incidental things like a new roof, higher property insurance, now inflation, my disposable income isn't where I feel comfortable buying a season. So now we may go see one play, not 3 plays or 5 plays or 6 plays,
right,
like we would have done in the past. And
right,
the audience needs to recognize that that disposable income is being shrunk because of inflation, because of the cost of property insurance rates increasing, and the other costs associated with that's tapping out and pulling money out of our disposable income. People, I mean, I just read in the Wall Street Journal today that prime and subprime homeowners are filing for bankruptcy at significantly higher rates than they had been, right? We're on the front edge of some bigger problems. We need to clamp down. We need to protect the citizens for the things we can. Property insurance is just one of the many things, but this is one thing we can work on right away.
So what else needs to be done? Because we've got about maybe 5 minutes or so left to chat. What else can be done to help the citizens of this state be able to afford living in this state, in this county? I mean, I know people that are moving counties because they're moving over north or east or west, the county line, just to get away from, the high cost of the county.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately, we look at where can we afford to live? And 1,100 to 1,500 people are moving to Florida every single day.
Yeah.
So we know the housing market's not going to weaken anytime soon. It may weaken around the country, but it's not going to weaken as fast here, even if it does. So to your point, what can we do? Well, we have to engage as citizens with our legislature. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, a nonpartisan. Call your state legislator, call your state senator, and say, listen, my property insurance prices are this. I was canceled on this date. What can you do? There are things that you need to be able to do so that we're more like the other states, that we're not paying 76% of all property insurance lawsuits. We need to bring down these costs that create unintended consequences on us all, that are making our lives more difficult. Listen, we live in Florida. We live in the paradise of the United States. We should be spending more time doing the things we want to do and less time having to do things we don't want to do, and that's paying higher bills. That's one of the reasons we were here. We chose this state. Most of us who've migrated here from elsewhere came here because the cost of living was lower, but it's not lower today.
No.
It's expensive in other ways, right?
Right.
And one of those ways is property insurance, and we've got to put an end to seeing these frivolous lawsuits so easily pushed through the system. Encourage your legislature, because this is why I do it. I used to have season tickets to Orlando Shakespeare Theater with my family. We loved the intimate relationship when I had younger kids. We don't do it now because we just can't afford to have that full season. So we'll go over for one play. We'll come over to the Performing Arts Center for a couple plays. So we'll do a couple community theater plays. We're more judicious with how we spend our money, and I wish I didn't have to be.
Well, we're all experiencing that, no matter where we live or
right.
what our situation is, because the costs are climbing, but the income isn't climbing in some cases. So, is there anything the judicial system can do to help this problem too?
Well, the judicial system actually already has stepped in. So the state Supreme Court has stepped in a couple times and pushed back on a couple of things that had happened in the past. One of those was the fee multipliers. And so what we allowed these attorneys to do was ask for, we had one-way attorney fees in property insurance, unfortunately. One way means only the one side can make the payment. But ultimately, where it comes out is the fee multiplier was allowing these attorneys to ask for twice their billing or 2.5 times their billing. Tamping down on that is going to help bring down those costs as well. Now, this is a long game, unfortunately.
Right.
We're not going to see the immediate impact to any of this on a significant level yet, but hopefully we can stop seeing the increase, the rise. If we see it plateau, then we can start bringing these things down. The other thing I would encourage your audience to keep in mind is property insurance is not a warranty. It's insurance. It's for the catastrophic damage
Well,
to your roof.
I always thought of insurance as I have to have it, but I can't use it.
Right.
Because if I use it, they'll cancel me, or they'll raise my rate so high that I won't be able to afford it.
Correct.
So to me, insurance was always something that, a necessary evil.
That's right. And it's been overly abused here in Florida, and that's why we're all paying higher rates. That's exactly right.
So we only have about a minute left or so. Is there anything you want to say to the folks directly about before we sign off?
Other than, first of all, support the arts, because they listen. I love the arts. I've raised my children
Yep.
in music and playing the piano and going to the arts, performing themselves. Support the arts in these difficult times when we're paying higher costs on these other things. Please make sure you allocate some time and some money to the arts, because that's that cultural bond that makes us a community. That's the thing that really provides that commonality that we can relate to with each other as neighbors, and that's going to make it a happier place in Hillsborough County.
So thank you so much, Tom, for being my guest on Connecting with Kim. Tom Gaitens is the Florida Executive Director of Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, and I hope that you've learned something from this time we spent together. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome back on Connecting with Kim at any time.
Thank you.
So we're so glad you joined us today. Our goal always is to give you information on people, places, entities, things that you need to know so that you can live your best life in our little corner of paradise, because it is still paradise, no matter what the challenges are. And I want to thank you for joining me today, and come back next week for another episode of Connecting with Kim. And thanks to my sponsor, the Spring of Tampa Bay, for providing my on-air wardrobe, which in this case today was this beautiful top, this wonderful necklace, and I appreciate them so much. And if you don't know anything about them, please research them. They do great work. They have done it for years. There's people that surviving domestic violence abuse that need this help, and you can find the Spring Boutique at the corner of Swann and Henderson. So thank you so much. That's all we have today for Connecting with Kim. Come back next week. Bye-bye.